Your soulmate wrote a secret love letter, you must read it before tomorrow. Love letter red heart sparkles. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because somewhere between a quiet evening and a restless night, your soulmate finally sat down with a blank page in front of them. For a long time, that page remained empty. Not because they had nothing to say. Because they had too much to say. Too many thoughts. Too many memories. Too many emotions. Too many truths they had been carrying silently. And listen to this. The strange thing about important letters is that they often begin long before the first word is written. This letter began inside their heart. Weeks before. Months before. Perhaps even longer. Every time they remembered something meaningful, another sentence was added. Every time a memory returned unexpectedly, another paragraph formed. Every time they wondered whether certain feelings still mattered, another page appeared in their imagination. The letter was already written inside them. They simply hadn't put it on paper yet. Because your heart needs this right now, because some messages spend a long time waiting for courage to catch up with them. Your soulmate was finally finding that courage. And listen to this. When they first picked up the pen, doubt immediately appeared. Should I really write this? Does it matter? Will these words change anything? What if I sound foolish? What if I say too much? The questions arrived quickly. One after another. Yet underneath every question was a deeper truth. The truth that silence had become heavier than honesty. And that truth was impossible to ignore. Because your heart needs this right now, because there comes a moment when carrying unspoken feelings becomes harder than expressing them. Your soulmate had reached that moment. And listen to this. For several minutes they stared at the blank page. Thinking. Reflecting. Remembering. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of trying to write the perfect sentence, they decided to write the most honest one. Slowly, carefully, they wrote. There is something I have wanted to tell you for a very long time. As soon as those words appeared, their heart began racing. Not because the sentence was dramatic. Because it was real. For the first time, what had existed only inside their thoughts now existed in the world. Visible. Written. Impossible to pretend it wasn't there. Because your heart needs this right now, because honesty changes everything the moment it leaves the heart and enters reality. Your soulmate was experiencing that change. And listen to this. The second sentence came easier. Then the third. Then another. Soon the page was filling with memories. Not grand memories. Not perfect memories. Simple moments. Quiet moments. The kind of moments most people forget. Yet somehow these were the moments that stayed. The moments that refused to disappear. The moments that continued carrying meaning long after they happened. And as they wrote about those moments, they smiled. Because they realized something. The memories that remain are rarely the loudest ones. They're the meaningful ones. Because your heart needs this right now, because significance is often hidden inside ordinary experiences. Your soulmate was rediscovering those experiences. And listen to this. The letter began talking about time. How quickly it moves. How silently it changes people. How unexpectedly it reveals what truly matters. They wrote about days that became months. Months that became years. And how certain memories somehow survived all of it. Not because they tried to remember them. Because the memories remembered themselves. Because they mattered. And that realization touched them deeply. Because your heart needs this right now, because the heart has a different way of measuring importance than the mind does. The mind measures time. The heart measures meaning. Your soulmate was finally understanding that difference. And listen to this. As the pages continued filling, something remarkable happened. The fear began shrinking. Not disappearing. Shrinking. Because every honest sentence made the next sentence easier. Every truthful paragraph made the next paragraph lighter. Every word removed a little more weight from their shoulders. For so long they had carried these thoughts alone. Now they no longer had to. And that felt freeing. Because your heart needs this right now, because truth often heals the person speaking it before it ever reaches the person hearing it. Your soulmate was beginning to heal. And listen to this. Halfway through the letter, they stopped writing and reread everything. Every line. Every paragraph. Every memory. And as they read, one realization became impossible to ignore. The letter wasn't really about the past. It wasn't about regret. It wasn't about wishing things had been different. It was about appreciation. Appreciation for lessons learned. Appreciation for moments shared. Appreciation for experiences that helped shape who they became. Suddenly the purpose of the letter became clear. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude often reveals truths that confusion hides. Your soulmate had discovered gratitude inside the letter. And listen to this. The deeper they wrote, the more honest they became. The more honest they became, the lighter they felt. The lighter they felt, the more certain they became that this letter needed to exist. Not because they expected a specific outcome. Not because they wanted to change the future. But because some truths deserve to be acknowledged. Some feelings deserve words. Some memories deserve recognition. And some letters deserve to be written. Because your heart needs this right now, because important things should not remain hidden forever. Your soulmate finally understood that. And as the first pages of the letter came to an end, one final sentence appeared. I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know I didn't want another day to pass without these words existing. The moment they wrote that sentence, they realized something. The hardest part was over. The letter was no longer trapped inside their heart. It had finally begun. Sparkles to be continued in Part 2, the truth hidden inside the letter, the memories they could never forget, and the words that revealed what their heart had been trying to say all along. Red Heart Love Letter Sparkles. Part 2 in 2000 words. ChatGPT 5:30 p.m. Part 2, the truth hidden inside the letter, the memories they could never forget, and the words their heart had been waiting to say. Extended version. Your soulmate wrote a secret love letter. You must read it before tomorrow. Love letter red heart sparkles. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after writing the first pages of the letter, your soulmate reached the point where they could no longer stay on the surface. The easy part was over. The introductions were written. The hesitation had faded. The first walls had fallen. Now only one thing remained. The truth. And listen to this. For several minutes they sat quietly, staring at the pages they had already written. Their heart was racing. Not because they didn't know what to say. Because they knew exactly what they wanted to say. And somehow that felt even more frightening. There is a certain kind of vulnerability that appears when a person stops speaking from their mind and starts speaking from their heart. Your soulmate had reached that point. Because your heart needs this right now, because honesty feels different when it becomes personal. This letter was becoming very personal. And listen to this. As they continued writing, they stopped focusing on perfect words. They stopped worrying about grammar. They stopped worrying about whether every sentence sounded beautiful. Instead, they focused on something much more important. Truth. Simple truth. The kind of truth that doesn't need decoration. The kind of truth that doesn't need perfection. The kind of truth that speaks for itself. Slowly, another paragraph appeared. Then another. Then another. And before long, the letter began telling a story. Not a story about events. A story about meaning. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaning is what remains long after details fade away. Your soulmate was writing about meaning now. And listen to this. One section of the letter focused on memories. Not dramatic memories. Not life-changing moments. Simple moments. Moments that most people would probably forget. A conversation. A smile. A shared experience. A small moment of understanding. Yet somehow those ordinary moments remained alive inside their heart. And as they wrote about them, they finally understood why. The memories themselves weren't important because they were extraordinary. They were important because of how they felt. Because your heart needs this right now, because the heart remembers emotions more than events. Your soulmate was remembering emotions. And listen to this. The letter continued. Page after page. And somewhere in the middle, they wrote something they had never admitted out loud before. They wrote, I spent a long time trying to understand why certain memories stayed with me. I thought time would eventually erase them. I thought distance would eventually weaken them. I thought life would eventually replace them. But some memories refused to disappear. Not because they belonged to the past. Because they still carried meaning. The moment they wrote those words, they stopped. Read them again. Then read them again. And suddenly they realized those words described exactly how they felt. Because your heart needs this right now, because self-understanding often arrives while we're trying to explain ourselves. Your soulmate was beginning to understand themselves. And listen to this. The deeper they went into the letter, the more emotional they became. Not sad. Not overwhelmed. Grateful. Deeply grateful. Grateful for experiences that taught important lessons. Grateful for moments that inspired growth. Grateful for connections that helped shape their perspective. For perhaps the first time in a very long while, they stopped focusing on what was missing. Instead, they focused on what had been gained. And that shift changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude transforms the way we see our story. Your soulmate story was changing as they wrote. And listen to this. Another section of the letter spoke about time. The strange way time changes everything. Yet somehow changes nothing. How people grow. How circumstances change. How life moves forward. Yet certain truths remain untouched. That realization fascinated them. Because no matter how much life had changed, certain feelings still felt familiar. Certain lessons still felt valuable. Certain memories still felt alive. And suddenly they understood something. Time doesn't decide what matters. Meaning decides what matters. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful things survive longer than we expect. Your soulmate had discovered that truth. And listen to this. As the pages continued filling, they became more honest than ever before. Not because they planned to. Because honesty was becoming easier. Every sentence removed another layer of fear. Every paragraph removed another layer of hesitation. Every page removed another layer of doubt. Soon they found themselves writing things they never expected to write. Things they had only whispered to themselves in quiet moments. Things they had never fully acknowledged. Things that had lived silently inside their heart for a very long time. And finally, those things had words. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes healing begins the moment a feeling finally finds language. Your soulmate was experiencing that healing. And listen to this. At one point, they paused and asked themselves a question. Why am I writing all of this? The answer arrived immediately. Because the letter deserved to exist. Because truth deserved to exist. Because appreciation deserved to exist. Because some things become too important to leave unspoken. The answer felt obvious once it appeared. And suddenly every page made sense. Because your heart needs this right now, because the purpose of honesty isn't always to change someone's future. Sometimes it's simply to honor the truth. Your soulmate was honoring the truth. And listen to this. Near the end of part 2, they wrote a paragraph that felt different from everything else. A paragraph that captured the entire reason for the letter. It said, I don't know where every road leads. I don't know what every tomorrow holds. I don't know how every story ends. But I know that some people leave a lasting mark on our lives. I know that some experiences continue teaching us long after they happen. And I know that some truths become too important to remain hidden forever. When they finished writing those words, they felt something unexpected. Relief. Real relief. The kind of relief that appears when the heart finally stops carrying something alone. Because your heart needs this right now, because honesty often feels heavy before it's spoken and light afterward. Your soulmate was finally feeling lighter. And as they looked down at the growing letter, they realized something important. The hardest truths had not been written yet. The deepest part of the letter was still ahead. The part that nearly made them stop writing altogether. The part that would require more courage than anything they had written so far. Sparkles to be continued in Part 3, the section of the letter that nearly made them tear everything up, the truth they were most afraid to admit, and the words that changed everything, Red Heart Love Letter Sparkles. Part 3 in 2000 words. ChatGPT 5:31 p.m. Part 3, the section of the letter that nearly made them tear everything up, the truth they were most afraid to admit, and the words that changed everything, extended version. Your soulmate wrote a secret love letter, you must read it before tomorrow. Love letter Red Heart Sparkles. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after writing page after page of memories, gratitude, and reflections, your soulmate finally arrived at the part of the letter they had been avoiding from the very beginning. The part they couldn't stop thinking about. The part they kept rewriting. The part that made their hands pause above the page. And listen to this. Up until now, writing had become easier. The memories flowed naturally. The gratitude felt genuine. The reflections came effortlessly. Every page seemed to lead smoothly into the next. But then they reached a sentence they weren't prepared to write. A sentence that felt heavier than every paragraph before it. A sentence that would force them to be completely honest. Not with anyone else. With themselves. Because your heart needs this right now, because the hardest truths are often the ones we must first admit to ourselves. Your soulmate was standing directly in front of one of those truths. And listen to this. For several minutes, they simply stared at the page. The room was quiet. The pen remained still. The unfinished sentence waited patiently. And suddenly, doubt returned. Not ordinary doubt. Deep doubt. The kind that appears when something matters more than we want to admit. Questions flooded their mind. Should I really say this? What if these words sound foolish? What if honesty changes everything? What if vulnerability becomes a mistake? What if silence is safer? The questions arrived one after another. Each one trying to convince them to stop writing. Because your heart needs this right now, because fear often becomes strongest just before an important truth is spoken. Your soulmate was experiencing that fear. And listen to this. For a moment, they considered ending the letter right there. Leaving certain things unsaid. Keeping certain thoughts hidden. Protecting themselves behind careful wording. After all, many people spend their entire lives doing exactly that. Many people become experts at hiding what matters most. Many people become comfortable with silence. Yet your soulmate realized something important. Silence had never actually brought peace. Silence had only delayed honesty. And honesty was waiting. Because your heart needs this right now, because delaying the truth is not the same thing as escaping it. Your soulmate finally understood that. And listen to this. As they sat there thinking, a memory appeared. Not a dramatic memory. Not a life-changing event. Just a simple moment. A moment that most people would probably overlook. Yet somehow that small memory carried enormous meaning. The memory reminded them why they started the letter in the first place. It reminded them why these words mattered. It reminded them why certain feelings had survived despite the passage of time. And suddenly the fear began losing some of its power. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful memories often remind us what truly matters. Your soulmate was being reminded. And listen to this. The more they reflected, the more one realization became impossible to ignore. They weren't afraid of writing the truth. They were afraid of being seen. Completely seen. Without filters. Without defenses. Without carefully constructed explanations. Because once the words existed on the page, there would be no hiding behind uncertainty anymore. The truth would simply be there. Clear. Visible. Real. Because your heart needs this right now, because vulnerability is frightening precisely because it is honest. Your soulmate was preparing to be completely honest. And listen to this. After a long silence, they finally lowered the pen to the page. Slowly. Carefully. Deliberately. And they wrote the sentence they had been avoiding. Not because they suddenly became fearless. Because they finally became brave. The sentence wasn't dramatic. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't designed to impress anyone. It was simply true. And that truth carried more power than any beautiful phrase ever could. Because your heart needs this right now, because genuine truth doesn't need decoration. Your soulmate's truth stood on its own. And listen to this. As the sentence appeared, they felt something unexpected. Relief. Not complete relief. But enough to keep going. Enough to write the next sentence. Then the next. Then the next. And before long, the section they feared most was finally taking shape. The words flowed differently now. More honestly. More openly. More courageously. Every line removed another layer of hesitation. Every paragraph removed another layer of fear. Every page brought them closer to complete honesty. Because your heart needs this right now, because courage grows each time we choose truth over fear. Your soulmate was growing more courageous with every word. And listen to this. At one point, they stopped and reread everything. The memories. The reflections. The gratitude. The honesty. And suddenly they realized something beautiful. The letter was no longer about the past. It was no longer about unanswered questions. It was no longer about uncertainty. It had become something much deeper. It had become a reflection of growth. A reflection of understanding. A reflection of appreciation. A reflection of truth. Because your heart needs this right now, because the deepest love letters are often about understanding rather than possession. Your soulmate was finally understanding. And listen to this. The fear that once seemed overwhelming now felt smaller. Not because the situation had changed. Because they had changed. The act of writing had transformed them. The act of honesty had transformed them. The act of vulnerability had transformed them. And with that transformation came peace. Not perfect peace. Real peace. The kind that appears when we stop hiding from ourselves. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace often begins where self-honesty begins. Your soulmate was discovering that peace. And listen to this. Near the end of this section, they wrote a paragraph they never imagined they would write. A paragraph that summarized everything their heart had been trying to say all along. I spent a long time searching for the right words. I thought honesty required perfection. I thought truth needed certainty. I thought feelings needed explanation. But now I understand something different. The things that matter most are often simple. They don't need perfection. They don't need guarantees. They only need honesty. And this letter is my attempt to be honest. When they finished writing those words, tears almost came to their eyes. Not because they were sad. Because they finally felt free. Because your heart needs this right now, because freedom often arrives when we stop carrying important truths alone. Your soulmate was finally experiencing that freedom. And as they looked down at the pages, they realized something. The most difficult section was finally complete. The truth had been written. The honesty existed. The fear had been faced. Yet one final page remained. One final message. One final paragraph. One final truth their heart needed you to hear before the letter could be finished. Sparkles to be continued in Part 4, the final words they wrote before folding the letter, the message they never wanted left unsaid, and why this letter changed their heart forever. Red Heart Love Letter Sparkles. Part 4 in 2000 words. ChatGPT 5:31 p.m. Part 4, the final words they wrote before folding the letter, the message they never wanted left unsaid, and why this letter changed their heart forever. Extended version. Your soulmate wrote a secret love letter, you must read it before tomorrow. Love letter. Red heart sparkles. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after all the memories, all the reflections, all the gratitude, and all the honesty, your soulmate finally arrived at the last page of the letter. The final page. The page they had been thinking about from the very beginning. The page that would determine how the entire letter ended. And listen to this. For a few moments, they simply sat there. Looking at everything they had written. Page after page. Paragraph after paragraph. Truth after truth. The letter had become much longer than they expected. Not because they intended to write so much. Because once honesty began flowing, it became difficult to stop. Every memory led to another memory. Every realization led to another realization. Every truth revealed another truth hiding beneath it. And suddenly they understood something. This letter was never really about finding the perfect words. It was about finally allowing the truth to exist. Because your heart needs this right now, because some feelings spend years waiting for permission to be spoken. Your soulmate had finally given those feelings permission. And listen to this. As they looked at the final blank section of the page, they felt one last wave of hesitation. Not because they wanted to change anything. Because endings matter. Endings stay with people. Endings become memories. Endings often determine what people remember most. Your soulmate knew this. Which is why they wanted the final words to be real. Not dramatic. Not exaggerated. Not designed to impress. Simply real. Because your heart needs this right now, because sincerity is more powerful than perfection. Your soulmate had learned that lesson while writing this letter. And listen to this. For a long time, they believed important messages required extraordinary language. Beautiful phrases. Perfect sentences. Memorable declarations. Yet after writing all these pages, they discovered something surprising. The most meaningful parts of the letter were also the simplest parts. The honest parts. The vulnerable parts. The moments where they stopped trying to sound impressive and simply spoke from the heart. Those were the sentences that carried the most weight. Those were the sentences that felt alive. Because your heart needs this right now, because the heart recognizes authenticity immediately. Your soulmate had finally embraced authenticity. And listen to this. The final page began with a deep breath. A slow breath. The kind of breath people take when they know they are about to finish something important. Then they started writing. Not quickly. Carefully. Every word mattered. Every sentence mattered. Every thought mattered. And the final message began to appear. If you've read this far, then thank you. Thank you for allowing these words to exist. Thank you for allowing honesty to exist. Thank you for allowing truth to exist. There were many times when I almost never wrote this letter. Many times when fear convinced me to stay silent. Many times when I told myself these thoughts were better left unsaid. But today I realized something important. Some things deserve words. Because your heart needs this right now, because appreciation often becomes clearer when we stop taking things for granted. Your soulmate had stopped taking things for granted. And listen to this. The deeper they wrote, the more peaceful they felt. Not because every question had been answered. Not because every uncertainty had disappeared. Because they were no longer carrying everything alone. The letter had become a bridge. A bridge between silence and honesty. A bridge between fear and courage. A bridge between uncertainty and understanding. And building that bridge changed them. More than they expected. Because your heart needs this right now, because honesty transforms the person speaking it as much as the person hearing it. Your soulmate was being transformed. And listen to this. As they approached the final paragraphs, they began reflecting on everything the letter represented. Not just feelings. Growth. Not just memories. Understanding. Not just vulnerability. Courage. The letter had become proof of something important. Proof that they were no longer the person who avoided difficult truths. Proof that they were no longer the person who waited forever. Proof that they were capable of honesty. And that realization filled them with gratitude. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth becomes visible when we compare who we were with who we are becoming. Your soulmate could finally see their growth. And listen to this. Near the very end, they wrote the words that mattered most. The words they hoped would never be forgotten. The words that captured everything they had learned throughout this journey. The words their heart had been trying to express all along. They wrote, "Life moves quickly. Faster than we expect. The days disappear. The months disappear. The years disappear. And sometimes we spend so much time waiting for the perfect moment that we forget to appreciate the moments we already have. This letter is my reminder not to make that mistake. It is my reminder that meaningful things deserve acknowledgement. Meaningful memories deserve appreciation. Meaningful lessons deserve gratitude. And meaningful truths deserve honesty." Those words felt different. Final. Complete. Certain. Because your heart needs this right now, because clarity often arrives when we stop searching for complicated answers. Your soulmate had finally found clarity. And listen to this. After writing those lines, they placed the pen down. The room became silent again. The letter was finished. Completely finished. Nothing left to add. Nothing left to remove. Nothing left to hide. Everything that needed to be said had been said. Everything that needed to exist now existed. And in that moment, they experienced something unexpected. Relief. Deep relief. The kind of relief that arrives after carrying something for far too long. The kind of relief that arrives when honesty finally replaces silence. The kind of relief that arrives when the heart finally speaks. Because your heart needs this right now, because some burdens disappear the moment they are shared. Your soulmate felt that burden disappear. And listen to this. They folded the letter slowly. Carefully. Almost respectfully. Not because it was perfect. Because it was genuine. Because it contained truth. Because it contained courage. Because it contained a version of themselves that had finally stopped hiding. And as they held the folded letter in their hands, one final realization appeared. The greatest gift of writing the letter was not what it said. The greatest gift was what it taught them. It taught them that honesty is worth the risk. It taught them that vulnerability is not weakness. It taught them that appreciation should never be postponed forever. It taught them that some truths deserve to be spoken while we still have the opportunity. Because your heart needs this right now, because life becomes lighter when honesty replaces fear. Your soulmate had finally discovered that. And listen to this. Before placing the letter away, they looked at it one last time and smiled. Not because they knew what the future would bring. Not because they knew how every story ends. But because they knew something important. The truth had finally been honored. The silence had finally ended. The words had finally been written. And that was enough.